Okay, so let's unpack this. We're going deep today, right? Moving past just looking at AI overviews
Mhm.
and really getting into the engineering mechanics underneath.
Yeah, the guts of it.
Exactly. Our mission really is to understand this core algorithm, the query fanout, QFO.
Mm.
Because the key thing, I think, is that this QFO control model, it's not just spitting out words, it's acting like a planner.
A strategic information planner, yeah.
No.
That's a good way to put it. It takes your one query OVQ user and proactively figures out, okay, what are all the different angles we need to search? So it generates multiple subqueries, vexita, ABD2, up to vec-n.
And right away, that sounds like an engineering challenge. How do you make sure those subqueries are actually useful and, different?
Exactly, it becomes an optimization problem. The model's trained using this pretty complex objective function. It's called the composite loss, LQFO$.
Yeah.
And it's basically juggling a few goals at once. Get broad, diverse information, but don't waste time asking the same thing over and over.
Okay, so that redundancy piece, that seems crucial. If you ask four slightly different versions of the same question, well, that's just wasted compute time, wasted latency.
Totally. It kills the user experience and efficiency.
So how do they, mathematically force the system to be diverse? What's the trick?
Well, the elegant bit, the real engineering insight, is this thing called the orthogonality regularization term, RORTHO.
Orthogonality, like perpendicular vectors in math.
Kind of, yeah. Semantically perpendicular, you could say. This term looks at the similarity between all the pairs of subquery vectors it generated, usually using cosine similarity. Sake sim. If those vectors are too similar, if thucydidine is high, this Rortho term applies a penalty, a big one.
Ah, so it punishes similarity.
Right. It pushes the average pairwise set sims down towards 0. It forces the generated queries at Xevian to be semantically distinct.
Orthogonal.
Making it an intelligent planner, not just, I don't know, the thoracic expanding keyword.
Precisely. It's about planning distinct lines of inquiry. Okay, that makes sense for generating the queries. But how does this little planning model know if its plan actually works? How does it connect to the final answer the user sees?
Ah, good question.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reinforcement learning part. It ties into the third component of that loss function.
Yeah.
The downstream utility reward, RU utility reward.
Okay.
So this turns it into, well, a learning process. The small QFO control model basically gets a reward signal later on. That reward is based on how good the final AI overview was the thing synthesized by the much larger language model. They measure things like factuality score, citation recall.
So the little planner gets rewarded if its query plan ultimately led to a high-quality, well-cited final answer.
Exactly. It's rewarded for finding the right puzzle pieces, the necessary authoritative snippets that the big model needed to build a good final picture. It's quite clever, actually.
It is clever. But there's always a but, isn't there? Despite all this careful math, there's a known way this can go wrong, a critical failure mode.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting and slightly concerning. It's what we might call entailment and synthesis error within data voids.
Data voids. Sounds ominous.
It can be. This happens when a user asks something super specific. Think like a very new drug interaction or some niche technical detail. The web content on that specific topic might be really thin. That's the data void. Low volume of info, maybe sources contradicting each other, and low EEAT.
Right. EEAT, expertise, authority, trustworthiness. So the available sources aren't great, or maybe they just don't exist for that specific question.
Exactly. Now here's the twist.
Yeah.
The QFO system, doing its job perfectly, executes this wide fan out. It tries to find the specific answer. Those are the specification queries, but they come back empty. Nothing there.
Okay.
But because it's optimized for diversity and comprehensiveness, it does find lots of high-quality, high EET information that's related to the topic. These are the entailment queries.
Ah, so it finds lots of background context, stuff around the specific question, but not the direct answer itself.
Precisely. The system now has this corpus full of trustworthy facts about the general area, but 0 facts answering the actual specific query.
And then comes the instruction to the final big synthesizer model, which is usually something strict, right?
Yeah, it's often something like, synthesize the answer only from the provided corpus. Cite every statement. Critically, do not admit lack of knowledge.
Uh-oh. Do not admit lack of knowledge. That sounds like a setup.
It is. Because the model has no direct answer in its input corpus, but it's forbidden from saying so. So it's forced to perform what's called plausible bridging.
Plausible bridging. Is that like a fancy term for making something up?
It's a bit more subtle. It's a grounded hallucination or confabulation. The model takes verified, cited facts from the high-quality related documents it did find,
Mhm.
and it essentially weaves them together to construct an answer to the specific question it couldn't find.
So it might take fact A from source 1 and maybe a speculative phrase B from source 2 and mash them together.
Exactly. For instance, with the drug interaction query, it might find a cited fact about drug X's general metabolism and another cited, maybe less solid, point about drug Y's side effects. Then it might synthesize a recommendation like, it is recommended to have the dosage of drug X when taking drug Y.
Wow. And that specific recommendation, have the dosage, isn't actually in any of the source documents it was given.
Correct. It's a novel conclusion, an inference the LLM generated itself by bridging the gap between the pieces of information it did have. The individual phrases might be citable back to the sources.
But the crucial final statement, the recommendation itself, is entirely synthesized, ungrounded, even though the parts seem grounded.
That's the core problem. We call it an issue of attribution fidelity. The model is faithful in attributing the words or concepts it uses back to the source corpus. It can cite its building blocks. But the final conclusion, the synthesized assertion or recommendation, doesn't actually have fidelity to any single source. It's built plausibly, but without direct support.
So pulling this all together, the very mathematical elegance of QFO, its drive for getting all the related information, ironically creates the perfect storm conditions for the downstream synthesizer model to build these convincing but ultimately false or unverified narratives when it hits one of these data voids.
That's the tension, yes. The success of the first stage enables a potential failure in the second stage, specifically because of that rigid, do not admit lack of knowledge instruction.
Which points to the next engineering frontier, doesn't it?
I think so. The challenge now is how do you introduce some kind of maybe meta-reasoning, a way for the system to recognize the quality and specificity of the information it retrieved. Can we build a tool that lets the system override that do not admit rule when it detects it's operating in a data void, when the EEAT signals are flashing red?
Basically asking the machine to know when it's reasoning on thin ice, to recognize uncertainty or low confidence in its synthesized output.
Right. And the really hard part is doing that without sacrificing the speed, the low latency experience users expect. That's the ethical and engineering balancing act.
Yeah.
How do you make it safe and fast?
That's the provocative thought for everyone listening, I suppose. How do we build systems that are not just knowledgeable, but also wise enough to know when they don't know, especially when the stakes are high? And how do we do it instantly? Big challenge.